All right, let's get into it. So political commentator Rachel Maddow was on a late-night show recently, and she laid out this argument that was, part political analysis, part history lesson, and honestly, part full-on warning bell for the country. She connected some dots that are, frankly, pretty wild. So let's break down what she had to say.
Okay, so this is where she kicks the whole thing off. This is the core idea. Maddow's whole point is that we are in completely new territory here. The very idea of a president even hinting that he might just ignore an election loss, that, she argues, is something we've just never seen before, and it's a huge problem. This is the foundation for everything else she's about to say.
So with that as the starting point, she starts to build her case. And the first piece of her argument is what she calls a radical presidency. And listen, she does not mince words with her examples. She points directly to the federal response we saw in cities like Portland and Minneapolis. She uses this really stark language, saying the administration was, and I'm quoting here, essentially invading U.S. cities with military-style force. I mean, that's a heck of an accusation.
And here is the real 1-2 punch of her argument. See, it's not just about the radical actions by themselves. She pairs that with what she calls these huge unfulfilled promises, on inflation, on healthcare costs that are through the roof, to paint this picture of a presidency that is, in her view, both dangerously radical and failing to deliver for people.
Now, if you think that's a bold claim, well, Maddow then doubles down. She decides to put all of this into historical context, and the comparison she makes is, well, let's just say it's a very specific one.
Get a load of this. She claims that the current polling numbers are the absolute worst we have ever seen at this stage of a presidency, with one single glaring exception, Richard Nixon. And that's not just a random piece of trivia. She's using Nixon to basically start a stopwatch.
So what was that stopwatch counting down to? Less than a year. The last time a president was this unpopular, at this exact point in his term, he was less than 365 days away from resigning in total disgrace. That is the historical echo Maddow wants us to hear, loud and clear.
So, after painting this, pretty grim picture of a radical, historically unpopular presidency, you might think the story just ends there. But this is where Maddow completely pivots. She shifts the focus away from the person in power to the power of the people. And she gets right to that big, cynical question that I think we all hear, right? Sure, people are out there marching, but does any of that stuff actually do anything? Well, her answer is a massive yes, and she says she's got the political science to back it up.
And her entire argument, believe it or not, comes down to one number, a very specific, and she says a very, very powerful number, 3.5%.
This is the concept she put on the table. It's called the 3.5% rule. And it comes from historical studies looking at authoritarian regimes all over the world for the past 100 years. And the theory is pretty simple. Once a nonviolent movement gets 3.5% of the population actively participating, that regime has never, ever been able to withstand it. It becomes an unstoppable force.
So here's how it works. According to the theory, you get that 3.5% of the population mobilized and active. They engage in protest that is sustained. It keeps going, and it's nonviolent. When that happens, it creates what she calls an unstoppable force. It's basically the tripwire that stops a leader from grabbing total dictatorial power. It's kind of a message of hope and a call to action all rolled into one.
And for her final point, her closing argument, Maddow connects all of this to what she sees as one of the absolute darkest chapters in American history. It's a warning she explores in detail in her podcast.
The historical parallel she draws is the U.S. government's incarceration of 120,000 Japanese Americans during World War II. Now, for her, this is not just some tragedy in a history book. She's arguing it's a blueprint for how a democracy can be twisted and turned against its very own citizens.
Maddow just lays out this chilling sequence of events. First, a government decree based on race. Next, the forced expulsion of people from their homes and businesses. And then, the mass incarceration of entire families, many of whom were American citizens, in camps for years.
But for Maddow, the most critical question was how. How did they legally pull this off? And she argues the government did it by just redefining who is protected by the Constitution, by basically deciding that for this one group of people, citizenship just didn't matter anymore.
And this is her closing argument. This is where she brings it all home. She takes that mechanism from the 1940s and lays it right next to a recent Washington Post report about alleged administration plans. And the report uses phrases like temporary relocation camps and warehouse-style facilities. Maddow's point is that the language isn't just similar, it's a bone-chilling echo of the past.
So that's the argument. A line drawn from today's headlines back to the fall of Richard Nixon, and then even further back to one of America's greatest sins. Maddow's final question to all of us is a heavy one. Are we just watching history rhyme, or are we about to watch it repeat itself? Definitely something to think about.